Hello. Please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, 2022 drives an ambulance into deep water. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fate to the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Adam Thomas, and I like to mountain bike everywhere. But actually, it's clearly not me.
And I'm Thomas Mariani, and I gotta just get in the mood to podcast real quick. Hold on, let me just put it on. Sailing takes me away, and I don't know where I'm going.
You make me feel like dancing. I want to dance that away.
There are a lot of interesting needle drops in both our films for the evening.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but welcome everybody to the Double-Edged Double Bill, where if you're new, every week Adam and I talk about a good and a bad feature related to a topic that we pick at the end of the previous episode. And the topic for this week is we're halfway through the year, so we decided, we do this every single year, Adam, where in about the midway point of the year, at the very end of the year, we talk about movies that came out in the year that we're recording. So right now it's 2022, and we got 2 2022 releases. Adam, putting aside, as we talk about, I guess every year we've done this show, the years get
Shittier?
shittier is the nicest way to put it.
Yeah.
In terms of overall stuff, it's fascinating to at least look at cinema and where it is currently. And what do you think of the movies so far of 2020?
I think for what's been good, it's been stellar. I think there have been a lot of really good ones this year. And even the best of the new phase of MCU movies, which is, not saying much, but the really good one. Really cool to see Sam Raimi doing Sam Raimi shit. 5 Cream, great. Just Jackass 4, even Jackass 4.5, the Northman. I mean, there's been a lot of great stuff this year. A lot of great stuff. I've seen more good than bad this year.
Right. As is also per usual of the year, you've seen less movies than I had necessarily, because I'm a freak who has no life. So I'm just like, movies, baby. I'm going to watch more movies.
Yep, 100%.
And I would generally agree, though, that I've watched more at least interesting or fun things as of yet in this year so far. And even the bad ones I think have been fascinating, if nothing else. And even just in terms of like the past couple of years, we've been talking about the fact that obviously COVID happened in 2020 and theaters have slowly come back. Like 2021 was a bit of a rocky period for that, like, how much is this working or not? And then as of yet with 2022, it seems like there's been a robust season. If nothing else, the signs of like Everything Everywhere All at Once doing as well as it has been interesting. And even the fact that we're recording this and Top Gun Maverick has been massively successful in a way I didn't expect.
No, me neither at all. Like, I expected it to do pretty well just because of nostalgia bait and stuff like that. But I mean, the fact of the matter, not only has it done so well financially, but critically is kind of mind blowing to me.
Yeah, even the fact that it's just been as successful with like modern audiences, because like we even talked about, like we're not Top Gun fans. We figured, I don't know, is that nostalgia there for people? I guess it's there, but also the word of mouth on the movie itself has been so stellar. And as someone who's seen it, especially a big screen format, I get it because it's miles ahead of the original movie, and it's so stellar, and it feels like Tom Cruise is coming back in like, you thought I was done being the best movie star ever? Fuck y'all! I'm not just Mission Impossible anymore, baby!
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yes, you have not. And we should also point out, if you become a patron, we do talk about very recent releases on our show, On the Edge of Relevance. And if you become a patron for $1, you get to, we try and at least put out one of those a month or so. Usually, as of right now, it's been more when something comes to like either streaming or VOD, we talk about it. But we like doing that show as well.
Yeah, that's really fun. Super, super fun. Just a little quick blurb. And most of the time, if you go by the track record, we've been fans of most of the things we've talked about.
Yeah, though we did also do probably our most scathing episode this year, talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Oh, no, without a doubt.
I re-listened to that recently, and I'm like, oh, damn, we were very, very bitter about that.
That might be our most scathing review, period, be it on Any Edge Violence or a normal
We
show.
were just like, by the end of it, just like torches and pitchforks against Texas Chainsaw.
Oh, yeah. Fuck this piece of shit. Fuck it.
And now we're saying that, but we're about more calm about it. Just, no, fuck that movie. It's terrible.
Yeah, fuck that movie.
Right.
It's terrible. It's getting a sequel, though, baby.
I'm sure it will, and I'm sure it'll be dumped on Netflix and be very talked about for like a weekend and then disappear off the face of the earth.
And be terrible.
And I think that's another thing also to point out is just like with movie theaters doing as well as they have, it also seems like there's been a weird reckoning with some streaming things, particularly with Netflix, where we've joked about this before, like, oh, Netflix will buy anything, based on that report they put out a couple months ago, just like, yeah, we're not doing this great, so we're gonna cut our losses on a lot of things. I think it's also interesting just to note that maybe streaming isn't the massive boon for, like, you know, mid-budget movies that they sold themselves to be.
Yeah, that's true. God, you're smart.
Hey, that's why people come. Just like me being smart, you'd be like, oh, golly gee, you're right. I guess so. I just see the moving pictures on the screen.
Them people look like real people.
Well, Adam, let's get into our double feature, because at the end of the last episode, we picked at least a bad pick, but our patrons over at patreon.com/GEDBpod, more on that at the end of the episode, did pick another choice for us to cover. And basically, we'll be talking about my bad pick, which is Deepwater, that we picked at the end of the last episode. And you had the pick of Ambulance, but that was chosen by our patrons via Patreon poll. So we'll be talking about both those movies this week. But let's start off with Deepwater.
Why is Mom so different around other people?
I think this is who she is.
You love me.
Of course.
You're not born.
No.
The fact that she's comfortable flaunting all these relationships around all of us, you're better than that.
She's different. That's what I like about her.
I just want to feel joy in my life.
You want to tell me why you didn't come home last night?
Not really.
This isn't a game, Melinda.
It's always been a game. Do you think we'll ever be just happy?
God, I hope so.
So Deepwater came out on March 18th, 2022 via Hulu. So not a theatrical release. It was originally meant to be that, but because of obviously COVID delays and stuff, they ended up not coming out until this past March, from director Adrian Lyne, who interestingly was very famous for doing sort of like erotic thrillers in this vein in the 80s and 90s, with stuff like Fatal Attraction, Indecent Proposal, and this movie is actually his first movie in about 20 years since Unfaithful. And just another fun bit to point out, it's based on the novel by Patricia Highsmith, but it is written by both Sam Levinson, who people know from like Euphoria, amongst some other things, and also Zach Helm, who was the guy who wrote and directed our bad pick from last week, Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Did you know any similarities in the structure of this film with Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium?
Well, no, I guess not. I'm gonna let you go first on this one. What did you think of Deepwater?
Well, yeah, I'll go first, and also I'll start with a bit of a plot synopsis if people aren't aware.
Yeah, go ahead.
And also, I guess we should say fair warning for both these movies. We talk in depth about both the movies we do for the show each week, and these are new movies, so spoilers for Deepwater and Ambulance.
Spoilers!
Oh no. Please, Mr. McCoy,
He's
stay
back.
back in last week. No, he's rising from the grave. I got new shoes!
Yeah, look at them! Ooh!
They're made of human skin. But
Oh, God. Good Lord.
so, Deepwater, basically, it's a story about this married couple who are Vic, played by Ben Affleck, and Melinda, played by Armas, who live in Louisiana, in New Orleans specifically, and are a very rich couple because Vic had developed basically the computer chip that goes into drones to shoot people down, and he has retired, and he's just living off a lot of money from getting that particular chip into production. They have a child, Trixie, and their marriage is in a bit of disarray because, Vic wanted to really have the child, and Melinda was like, well, you know what? I guess I can give you this, but I didn't really want that with my life. So the trade-off is we get to be a family, and you don't want me to divorce you. That's fine. But I'm going to fuck around with so many dudes all the time and flying in your face. And Ben Affleck was like, deal, I guess. But he has noticeably become a lot more bitter and angry about this agreement that's gone on, and is a bit concerned that Armas has, become a lot more of like an alcoholic and is drinking a lot. And he ends up having sort of sinister undertones fucking with her various boyfriends who she brings over to the house and shit like that, and might, implies jokingly like, oh, I'm a murderer, lol, JK, right? Or maybe not. And the movie's basically about, like, maybe is he a murderer, is he not? I don't know. It's not necessarily that subtle about what it is with this character. And yeah, this is trying to be sort of like an erotic crime thriller, and it's not a genre that, like, I've as familiar with, because, like, honestly, that genre kind of, like, came and went long before I was watching movies consistently. I'd heard bad things, so I was like, okay, let's see how this goes necessarily. And despite being our bad pick, I ended up kind of enjoying Deep Water as, to me, at least, I consider it pretty watchable trash. I think there's some fun performances from the various different actors in here, and also I think Adrian Lyne's a pretty solid director. Clearly the script from Helm and Levinson I think is very tonally bizarre and weird and kind of all over the place, but I think the actors and the director kind of run with that in ways that sometimes don't work, but I think more than not make at least like a fun ride, if not maybe a great ride. It's kind of like a fun guilty pleasure movie for me, where I would watch and be like, oh man, this is some dumb shit, but go on, please, do tell. And I kind of had fun with it myself.
Yeah, I didn't. It's too long. There's no question about what's going on in the movie. Like, it's pretty obvious. Even the big shocker reveal is not that shocking. He basically is the creepiest fucking dude in the world, right from the beginning. It's just there's no surprise here to me. They fall back into these sort of raunchy sex bits too much for me, which I get. It's supposed to be sort of this erotic thriller, and that's fine. But they even fall back into the same sort of move, I guess, if you want to say. There's a lot of hand stuff that constantly happens, and you're like, okay, all right. I've seen this now 5 times. None of it really works for me. The funniest part to me is that Dash Mihok and fucking Laurel Howery are Ben Affleck's best friends. Like, that's
right, of course. No, they seem like a natural friend group.
Absolutely. That is the 3 amigos, baby. But none of it just doesn't work for me. Ben Affleck, granted, was probably tired. I think this is right after his sort of the comeback from his big fall with his substance abuse and stuff like that. So he looks exhausted. I think that might be the point of the character as well. But he looks really tired. It's not that he's phoning it in, but it's not really like a great performance either. Ana de Armas is fine. It's not the best performance I've seen. Like, Knives Out is still good. Even No Time to Die, really good. This is more Knock Knock to me, which, woof. Although I will say she was the best part of Knock Knock. But it's just, it falls flat to me ultimately. And the final sort of bit with the bike in the car is so laughably stupid. And the thing is, they're not going for that. They're not going for it to be trashy, like fun. He's trying to really make like another Unfaithful or a, Basic Instinct sort of erotic thriller. And it doesn't work for me. And I don't find any of it erotic. I don't find any of it thrilling. I just think it's an ultimate huge bore fest.
I think the part you're forgetting about with that finale that would make me disagree with the idea that they're not trying at all for that is, I think you can agree with me, the MVP of this movie is Tracy Letts, is Dawn. Who, every time that motherfucker shows up, he's so fun. He is so, like, I think they're really embracing the fact that this dude is walking in on this weird scenario where this couple is, like, shambling and doing horrible shit, and he's just like, these motherfuckers, I don't get it. Like, all of his reaction shots are phenomenal, even during that finale, all the stuff which is like, goddamn fucking autocorrect and shit like that. I think they're embracing the trashy fun in sequences like that.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. He is fun, though. Tracy Letts is fun in it. I will give you that. I will say when Ben Affleck fucking beans what's his name from American Horror Story in the face with a rock.
Yeah, Finn Wittrock. Yes,
that was pretty fucking funny. I laughed pretty hard at that one.
But I think even like with what you're talking about with like Affleck and the Armas, like I agree that I think Ben Affleck looks very tired in a way that kind of mirrors where his sort of like career and life were at that point, but also in a way that I thought was like engaging in a weird, once again, trashy way. Because I agree that I don't think like it's not subtle that he's obviously going to be a murderer, and I don't think the movie is really trying to like make it that much of like a twist that he's a murderer. I think it's embracing the fact that like this dude is fucking weird and off kilter from the beginning, and that's what's like so engaging to me. Like particularly any of the scenes he has with shout out to Brendan Miller, who's weirdly the recurring thing in our episode, who plays like the first boyfriend of Ana de Armas in this, and he also shows up as one of the crew, Trent, who's wearing fucking the sandals in Ambulance.
Holy shit, it is him.
Right, it's the same guy. I didn't know that until I was rewatching both these movies.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, it's him.
Yeah,
like
right.
all the scenes with him and Ben Affleck, I find so fun in a way that I think the movie is like really leaning into, where he's just like, oh, hey, I'm sorry about like if you're kind of weirded out by me going around with her. It's like, oh, that's no problem. I mean, you know what happened to her last boyfriend? I murdered him. I'm just fucking with you, or maybe I'm not. And I think Affleck's leaning into that in a really fun way. Every time he's just like really embracing, like, look, I'm a weirdo, fucking bitter, angry piece of shit. And I think it's one of his more like engagingly trashy performances in quite a bit.
All right. Look, I will say, I think Affleck is having fun in this. I think he's playing it on a different level than kind of anyone else is. I think that might be the big problem with the movie. I think everybody else is on a sort of different wavelength because he's a big fucking dude, and they do play it up that he's a big guy in this movie. Like even when he's walking through the party in the beginning, he's 6 inches taller than everybody. Like it's obvious his stature. Like it's not like they don't point it out that he's imposing, but they don't shy away from the fact that he's kind of a big, intimidating guy. But I think he's having fun. I think Ana de Armas is playing it as a straight erotic thriller.
I don't know, even her, I think she's having a bit more of like a campy fun with certain bits. I think particularly the bit where she gives Affleck Roadhead and then comes back up and picks a pube out of her fucking teeth. I think she knows that this is kind of silly.
See, I didn't get, I mean, I remember the scene obviously, but I didn't take that from that. I just took it as just trashy shit. I didn't take it as fun. I didn't take it as anything. I took it as more as like trying to have some kind of shock value just so people would be like, oh my God. It reminds me of like the Sharon Stone and Basic Instinct, interrogation moment and all that, where they're just trying to be shocking. And to me, it doesn't work.
I don't know necessarily, because it's a weird thing where the Patricia Highsmith novel, which I haven't read myself, but apparently it was actually took place in like the 50s, where I guess a lot of the elements that are in here would have been a lot more shocking and daring and new.
True.
And I think they kind of know that, like, okay, we can't necessarily be shocking with all of this, but let's kind of play as much of the campy stuff as we can. And my biggest disagreement with you is the idea that, they claim to be racism too much. If anything, I wish they had more of that, because I think there's a lot more of the fun with some of the things, particularly like when they have their weird sex scene where she's like, oh, kiss my butt, which I love. She just says like, kiss my butt, not even like eat my ass or anything like actually dirty. It's a
Does she say, will you kiss my butt or kiss my ass?
Even kiss my ass feels weird. It feels more like what a child would think is dirty. Of just like,
yeah.
Oh, kiss my ass, as opposed to anything remotely erotic. And I think it kind of plays in the fact that these two are so distant from each other that they're like, oh, even our sex play feels a lot more tame because we're really distant and we don't actually have that much of a connection. And I think that's really the case, especially with like any of the scenes where like they're arguing with each other while one of her boyfriends is over, like Brendan Miller, where she's just like, oh, let me eat that grilled cheese instead of your bullshit lobster bisque. Oh, it's so good. And it's like she has the taste palate of a child and shit like that. It feels like lower rent B tier, like almost Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, like not as good as that, but like a fun copy basically of that, where we're just like, oh, we're bitter with each other going back and forth. And I think it's like, once again, I find that to be fun in a trashy way. I think we both agree that it's trashy, but we disagree on like how fun some of those bits are.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely 100% accurate. I don't know, man. Like I don't consider myself a prude or anything like that, like at all. But like I said, I just think this is just trying to just be shocking. And in today's day and age, it just doesn't work for me. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
I think if it was trying to be more shocking, they would lean more into the sort of eroticism than I think they are in this movie. Because most of this movie isn't even about them having sex as much as Ana de Armas is having sex off screen with these other guys. And Ben Affleck is sulking about it, especially with his fucking snails, which I also love. The bit where, like, oh, I've had a rough day. Let me play around with my snails who are also fucking each other, basically. Well, I'm not getting any. I'm gonna watch snails fuck, basically. Just these weird, bizarre intrusions that feel kind of like Sam Levinson, who's a guy I don't like. I haven't seen Euphoria, but the other scripts he's written feel way more like what you're talking about with, like, oh, let me, like, shock and do some fucked up weird shit. Like, watch Assassination Nation. That is one of the most, like, edgelordy movies possible, which is about, like, oh, it's a movie that's about, like, it's a group of, like, high schoolers who get involved in, like, the leaking of, like, some, like, dirty secrets online and bullshit like that. It's terrible. It's so much more awful, as opposed to, I think they kind of took some of those moments that could have been more quote-unquote shocking in that Sam Levinson way, like trying too hard, and just embraced it being more of like, well, let's like kind of make this almost like a very over the top, like direct-to-video sequel to like a Gone Girl. That's what it almost feels like. It feels like the lower rent Gone Girl that would have come out like circa 2015 or so. And I think it's embracing kind of like the charm of just like, oh, we're all doing fucked up weird things, but there's a bit of a wink in a way that I find fun. I do agree that I don't think it's like as consistent. I agree with you that it should have been shorter, for one thing, and just kind of like got to some of these better bits. Like, I love the thing personally with like the bike and the fucking him chasing after Tracy Letts, especially when like Tracy Letts finds Ben Affleck burying the body in the quote unquote in the water, and he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? How are you doing, Tracy Letts? Oh, the body came up, and then they like chase each other. I find that kind of fun.
All right. I mean, I guess that was the most fun I had in the movie, that whole scene with him getting on the bike and chasing him and all that shit. Him, you know, throwing the phone down, fucking autocorrect, and then how you gonna catch me now on your fucking bike and all that, and then
and going over the cliff.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell? But then the obvious like green screen Ben Affleck, it's so silly looking. It's so poorly done. And then the whole where the opening's actually the ending. It's such a silly fucking movie in not a good way.
Yeah, I guess I'm arguing it's a bit more silly in a fun way. With some of those bits, like even the earlier bit with like when Ben Affleck barges into Tracy Letts and Kristen Connolly's like family dinner.
That was a good bit.
I love all that because especially Tracy Letts has this like kind of look on his face of just like, oh fuck, did Stray Cat came in, but it's Ben Affleck. Just like, God damn it, get the fuck out of my backyard! How dare you come here? I think those moments, that's a pretty fun moment. Or even like when they're getting the body of like the one boyfriend out of the pool and they like drop it and like, God damn it, what the fuck's happening? Like I think it's a movie that embraces that kind of campness and fun in places, but I agree, I think it should have been more consistent. I think it would have been an even more enjoyable trashy ride than what it is, because it definitely suffers from like a lot of pacing issues in particular. It should not have been like, it's a little over 2 hours. It should have easily been like, I don't know, an hour 45. It would have been like perfect for that.
It's just way too long for what the ultimate reveal is that, you know, like I said, pretty much right away, right? Like, you know where it's going.
But I even think, like, there's certain bits, like, you mentioned, you referenced earlier the thing with their daughter, who I love is this weird non-entity in the movie, where sometimes she shows up and sometimes she isn't there just for the convenience that we don't want her around, like, the murdered bodies. And I like that her and Affleck have, like, a fun back and forth, and leading up to her, like, getting in the bathtub and just being like, so, Daddy, how did you murder him? Well, who says that I murdered him? I mean, it's pretty obvious that you did. Well, let's just keep that between us. Just like, aw, a beautiful father-daughter cover-up of a murder.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, and then like the daughter at the end throwing her fucking suitcase into the pool. We're not going anywhere. And then like she's the one burning the wallet. Like, so are we led to believe that she can keep having her affairs? He's going to keep murdering, and they just got to accept it?
I don't even think it's like they accept it. I think it's just almost like she gets the thrill of that happening. It's just like, oh, you're finally taking charge. Because I think that's, the movie tries to play this weird ambiguous sex game almost. Like, Ana de Armas keeps putting these boyfriends like right in front of Ben Affleck's face. Like, yeah, isn't it fucked up? I'm doing this like right in front of you. Isn't this great? Like, even when her one pianist boyfriend comes over and does this ridiculous playing, and then she backs her ass into his dick.
And starts like jerking him off, basically.
Right, basically, with her ass cheeks, basically. Yeah, like, I think she's trying to basically say like, oh, isn't this fucked up? Doesn't that make you angry? Doesn't that make you want to like make me all for yourself? Like, it almost feels like she's trying to court him back And by the end, just like, oh, you killed Finn Wittrock? It's kind of fucking hot. I'll cover that up for you. I think the movie is kind of... It doesn't do the best job of telling that, but that's at least what I interpreted the ending as.
Yeah, maybe. I just took it as they both have their fucking vices now, and they neither would exist without the other. That's kind of how I took it, where she's going to be adulterous and he's going to kill him. And it's just going to play into this weird sexual cycle for him.
Right, and I would argue she finds that kind of hot based on the ending.
Oh, she definitely does. Yeah. Where she like smiles and then walks into her room. Like, are you going to follow me type of deal? And he doesn't. But still, that's kind of how, yeah, I agree with that.
I think even like the performances of some of these side people, like I love Finn Wittrock. I think he's been the best part of some very bad, say, Ryan Murphy shows in particular. And I love him coming and just like, oh, I'm an old friend of hers from college and we're just palling around, right? And like he, particularly his reactions to Affleck with stuff like where she says, oh yeah, he was the first American I fucked. And it's like, I don't know if we need to tell him. It's like, no, it's fine. Keep going. He's like, I don't know what's happening here. I'm kind of disturbed.
He's the most likable out of all like her boyfriends. I think he was fine. And then like him in the car, like, don't you think you're going a little fast, Vic? like, yeah, he was fine. Like I said, he takes that rock to the face like a champ.
And also shout out to that fucking dog reactions to like him being that guy being murdered. The dog is so adorable, just like, oh well, I guess he's dead. Another victim for the fire.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. I wasn't necessarily bored, but I was definitely like, where is this going and why am I watching this? If that makes sense. Like it kept my interest for the almost 2 hours or whatever, but it's even talking to you about now, it's like, I don't really care about this movie.
Obviously, a lot of the appeal was the fact that when this was coming out, there was the whole thing where right after they shot it, and Armas and Ben Affleck were a couple, and that's where a lot of the fun, like, sort of things, especially like early in quarantine happened, where they were just like, oh, we're together, and we're having like a fun love affair, and then it ended with him like getting Dunkin Donuts and it dropping in his lap, and just almost feels like the movie weirdly kind of mirrors that, where by the end, this is fully like Ben Affleck Dunkin Donuts mode. Where he's just like, oh god, I fucking hate this. I can't believe I'm like doing this like silly bullshit movie. But in a way where he also is kind of like having fun with it. Maybe part of it is just that we don't get movies like this anymore. There's been a lot of discussion about like, oh, like sex has become so limited in terms of like modern like blockbusters, especially where it's like, oh, sure, we have like big hunky dudes in our movies, but they don't even have any kind of sex appeal. They're like statues basically at this point. And I kind of like a movie that's willing to embrace like, yeah, there's a bit of like this fun, dumb sexuality that's in here, but in a way that still is like kind of like winking and nodding. I think the worst version of this movie is, I watched a couple of Adrian Lyne movies in anticipation of this, is like Indecent Proposal, where that's a movie that wants to be like erotic and sultry for especially like 1993, and it is tame as fuck. Like that movie is bizarrely sexless, despite the allure of like, oh, it's Woody Harrelson and Demi Moore in the middle of this love triangle with like sexy older Robert Redford at that point. Like, oh, this is gonna be like so hot, and that movie's like chaste to such a bizarre degree,
for sure.
As opposed to this movie embraces the eroticism as much as it can. I think if anything, like I said, it should have embraced it even further. Like, just go weird NC-17's, like, bizarreness with this, as opposed to... But that still is, like, for our modern cinematic climate, it was a bit, at least, different.
Yeah, I guess that's true. If they would have leaned even harder into it to where it would have been, like, as hard as they lean into it, like, in even, like, a Showgirls type of thing, where then it would have been like, I can't believe they're going this far. This is crazy.
Right. Like, almost like after every murder, him and Armas have, like, a huge sex scene. Like, whoa, what's happening?
Like crazy showgirl pool sex.
Okay.
I guess so. Then it would at least been like fun on a baffling level. I'm glad you had fun with it. Like, that's great. I absolutely did not.
Yeah, and if anything, I just feel sad that you couldn't have that. I wish I could have that with Adam all the time, where we just have like such equal fun on every movie. I think we're going to be talking about that with our second movie based on your Letterboxd score for the other one.
Oh boy.
This might be a trend, so why don't we go ahead and do our final thoughts on this movie and get into our other movies. So Adam, final thoughts on Deepwater.
It's a movie with good looking people in it that is pretty boring.
Yeah, and it's a movie with good people in it, I agree. That is intermittently really fun, I would say. Like, it's I wish it was a bit more of like the zaniness that we're talking about, but I think it has those kind of moments interspersed throughout in a way that made it kind of like, once again, a watch where I was watching like, just like, oh my god, this is kind of dumb. let me pick up this new thing of popcorn and keep watching though. Like I think it's a weird thing where I think we both had similar reactions in terms of like, oh, this is dumb and silly and whatever. But we at least had the big difference is just the fact that like I found that kind of fun and you didn't. And that sometimes happens. And that's cool.
And that is just fine, baby.
But now, let's get into our quote unquote good feature, one of us may say, Ambulance.
That's my brother, Will.
I could use some help.
My wife needs this surgery.
This is real life.
How's that right? You put your life down on the line for this country? You leave your family, your home? How much do you need?
231.
How about more? 32 million. I need an extra man.
I came to you for a loan.
Look, have I ever gotten you anything that I couldn't get you out of? It's time for you to do something for your family. What can I do you for, officer? We're just doing a transfer in the back. I'll lay you in 20 minutes.
If I could just get it done real quick, because I'm on the clock. Promise not to rob the place.
Seriously, because that would be bad for my job. Stop! Get out!
What do you want?
Just gonna borrow it.
I got a cop shot. I gotta get him to the hospital.
I'm gonna need you to help us. Why don't you help us?
We're doing hostages now.
We're not the bad guys. We're just the guys trying to get home.
We don't get to walk off into the sunset!
You get your helos out of here now!
So Ambulance came out April 8th, 2022, from director Michael Bay, based on a Danish film, actually. This is a remake, which I was surprised to find out about. And this did come out in theaters, but was not extremely successful. Was cost about $40 million, only made about $51 million or so. And if you're unaware, this movie is a little crime thriller that stars Johan Abdul-Mateen II as Will, who's a vet who is having issues with his insurance and trying to get an experimental surgery for his wife, who recently had just given birth to their child. And when he's on hard times, he goes over to his brother, Danny, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who is some sort of criminal. And they both have a previous life of like doing a bunch of crimes and stuff like that together that Will is trying to get out of. But Danny's like, hey, you know what? Let's have one last ride, and I can help you get some of the money you need for the experimental surgery for your wife. And so they have a huge bank heist that happens, and things seem to be going pretty well until a couple cops walk in, and they're like, oh shit, what's going to happen? And everything starts falling apart. One of the cops gets shot in the process, and an ambulance comes in, which has EMT Cam, played by Isaac Gonzalez, in it. And as they pick up the cop, Will and Danny hijack the ambulance and start a high-speed chase throughout downtown Los Angeles as they try and, kind of maneuver and get that money out, but also they have this cop who's dying in the back seat after getting shot. And it's a whirlwind tour of Michael Bay bizarre action beats done with a lot of drones, which is the big sort of appeal of this movie to some people, is that Michael Bay used some drone photography and did a lot of fascinating different camera movements for him. And I saw this in the theater. I had a lot of fun with it. But Adam and our patrons ended up choosing this as a good pick. Did you agree with it being a good pick, Adam, now having finally seen it?
No.
Oh, wow.
It's fine, I guess. I don't know personally what everybody's seeing in it that's like, oh my God, Michael Bay. Like, yeah, it's Michael Bay just doing Michael Bay bullshit, which it's so funny to me that people just shit on this guy, including myself, and I will still shit on this guy for just all he does is action porn and explosion porn and blah. So he does that again, but he just adds drones, and people are like, oh my God, it's fucking badass. It's just the same shit he's done over and over and over. The whole movie is dumb. I will say Gyllenhaal is having the time of his life in this movie, and he is super fun in it. Like, it is Jake Gyllenhaal just at level 11 compared to everybody else. Like, he's really having a blast. Everybody else around him, though, is just boring if we're an action movie. And it's just let's fucking get to where we're going. Like, it's an action movie that just drags ass, but it's explosion. It's the same shit that people have been, like I said, giving Michael Bay shit for years now. But he introduces some drones, and Gyllenhaal's good, and so people are like, it's good. No, it's good. Well, but it is the same thing he's always done. I mean, this feels like Bad Boys. It feels like Bad Boys 2. It feels like Transformers. It feels like all of those things. And which it's fine if people like this movie. I have no problem with that. But I'm just saying, personally, I just don't like that type of filmmaking that he's been doing that long, and this is just like that for me too. This isn't far enough from the usual shit I've seen him do to excite me.
Well, I think what's interesting about sort of the reception element of this is it comes a lot from, I think, people kind of looking back on Bay-isms in a different context, because I've seen a lot of people kind of embrace the sort of Michael Bay aesthetic a bit more now. I think mainly just because, quite frankly, American action has, like, dwindled as much as it has in recent years with, like, most other theatrical releases, or even the straight-to-streaming releases. So I think it's definitely more a case of Michael Bay has a distinctive style that people, in retrospect, are like, well, at least he has a distinctive style, as opposed to just nothing burger bullshit that mostly comes out.
But that's also the thing to do. That's why Nicolas Cage is so hot right now. That's why it's a lot of things that people shit on forever. All of a sudden, like, no, it's good. Hey, no, actually, it's good. That's what happens. I mean, it happens all the time, and I feel like it's just a trendy thing to do.
In terms of this, I enjoyed Ambulance. I've seen it twice now. I wouldn't say necessarily love it. I would still say it's one of the upper echelon of Bay movies. If nothing else, because I do agree with you that it has some of like the Bay-isms, but I think he pulls back in terms of like there aren't as many like sort of the gross stereotypes I would argue there are in a lot of Bay movies. I think this one, like for example, just something as simple as the one cop or the one FBI agent who's like the expert on banks being in a gay relationship and it just not being that big of a deal, I think is like a massive improvement compared to that would have been an elaborate, massive like back and forth between two like huge stereotypes compared to now. I like the fact that it's like not like that big a deal and just is kind of like, oh, it's embraced and then just kind of like continues forward from that.
But how stereotypical can you make the Latino gang?
My biggest problem with the movie, honestly, is the Latino gang.
Yeah, I completely agree.
For me, with this movie, the setup is a bit wonky, and I think the double climax that happened during like the last 20 minutes or so are, it feels like one or the other. Guys, pick one of the two, as opposed to having both of them. I think everything from when the bank robbery starts through to like when they do like the switcheroo with all the different ambulances is consistently pretty fun to me. I didn't feel that drag necessarily with the movie. I felt like during that particular section, like that huge stretch is like a really like consistently fun, engaging action romp.
I think I can agree with you on that. I think it held my attention pretty solid till that point. But once after the switch happens, it really went downhill for me. And I know this sounds crazy, but once Garrett Dillahunt, was taken out, then that kind of, to me, you lost the main sort of, the foil. Like, he was really fun. And once they took him out, not to say that the FBI guy wasn't good, but it's just you needed somebody who didn't have a tie to them.
Yeah, I really wish like the stuff with the Latino gang probably ended during like after the switcheroo, and we just kind of got to like they're at the ambulance and they have like the whole sniper thing going on. I think that would have been a much more fun movie. Would have like landed from this movie that I think is fun and good, but would have been like ended up like, oh, this is like a great movie if they had like cut some of that shit out for me personally.
Yeah, because you get the lowrider with the Gatling gun, you get the one cop's partner getting his moment by taking out the son of the head of Latino gang. You get that whole shootout scene, then the whole shit with her shooting Yael with the cop's gun. I mean, it's too much. It just packs in way too much. Like, the stakes are already high enough. You don't need all this too.
Yeah, and honestly, like you mentioned, like I agree with you that Gyllenhaal is like the standout, is having so much fun as like a villainous character. Like every time he just pops in doing bullshit like the sailing or him like you don't understand what the fuck's happening right now. Like I'm gonna like, or even him talking.
Their whole slap fight in the front of the ambulance while they're driving is fucking great.
That bit's really fun. Or even like the bit where he's calling Garrett Dillahunt over the phone. It's just like, by the way, just so I get this straight, you're supposed to be saving the hostages, right? That's what your goal is here? That's what you're supposed to be fucking doing? And I think that, but at the same time, I also really like Yahan Abdul-Mateen and Isaiah Gonzalez. I think they have like a really fun like three-way kind of chemistry that works where she's desperately trying like, okay, let me see if I can communicate with the FBI guys. Let me see if I can get the fuck out of here, but also trying to save this cop's life at the same time. Like particularly the standout sequence to me is the whole thing with like the Zoom ruptured spleen thing. I love that. That sequence is so fucking fun and tense. And like the moment the spleen bursts, I still remember like in the theater, like, oh my fucking god, what's about to happen? And I think all that is like really stellar. I don't think like you didn't like either of them in the movie though, her or Yahan.
They just felt like just stereotypical characters to me, where she's, this hard-edged paramedic. She's seen so much, she won't allow herself to get attached to anybody, and blah blah blah. And then him, he's this war vet who was, such a fucking badass when he's in the army. And he comes home and nobody cares about him, and he can't get insurance. And I mean, and not to say that that's not something that doesn't happen, but it's a character arc, that a character type I've seen over and over and over. It's just, they're both good in it, acting wise. I mean, I would never say anything bad about Hill, especially after fucking Candyman and fucking Watchmen and all that stuff. I mean, the guy's fantastic, and she has really come a long way from where she started. I mean, she's getting really good. I mean, look at her from like Alita to this. You're like, holy shit, is she good? Although Morbius is her standout, of course.
Well, that's true. Well, Morbius, I'm sorry, by the way, that all you guys, that we didn't cover Morbius. It's Morbin time, everybody. I'm so sorry.
I tried to tell him, but Thomas is like, no, people don't like it. I'm like, are you kidding me? There's been fan campaigns. But
it was released to theaters and everyone went and saw it.
Yeah, right. I love that they're trying to do it again. Look, we just didn't think you guys were serious. Bring it back. We'll go see it. Like I said, character types I've seen over and over. I think they do the best they can with it, but to me, it's just nothing really to it.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that it's a familiar archetype, but I think just having a familiar archetype doesn't necessarily mean it's bad to me. And I think, like, dismissing just like, oh, they do the best they can with it, I think they do a lot more than is on the page. In a way, like, especially with Gahan, like, I like the fact that he has a clear brother relationship with Danny that I felt was very believable, but at the same time, like, he wants to, like, make sure, like, he's sort of the middleman of the situation where he's willing to help out with, like, the whole spleen rupturing bit. He actually wants to, like, keep this guy alive at the same time that he's also trying to keep this money, like, being such a thing. Even, like, the scene where, like, he calls his wife over the phone, that's been done plenty of times, sure, but he plays it so genuinely in a way where I'm just like, man, I feel for that dude, and it's a bummer that he's in the middle of the situation.
Okay, let me clarify. I don't have a problem with familiar character types being done. I really don't. But when, in my opinion, when everything else besides Jake Gyllenhaal surrounding the movie is familiar, and I've seen it before, then it just becomes, the whole thing becomes a cliche and a stereotype to me.
I mean, I would argue even Jake Gyllenhaal's character is very familiar. Just like, he's the wacky guy that's robbing the bank, but he's having a lot of fun with it.
But he's on a completely different level than everybody else in this movie. To me, the other ones, like I said, I think they're doing the best they can with the role. I don't see them elevating the character archetype really much at all. There's a couple good scenes, like you said, him on the phone with the wife and the Zoom surgery scene. Really good stuff. I agree. Really tense, sad stuff, especially the phone call with the wife. You can see it all over his face, how just fucking upset he is because he's disappointed her. And by the way, the woman who plays his wife is the one who plays Reva and Obi-Wan. Man, is she great in this, in both of these. I mean, they don't give her a lot to do in this either, but she's really good, really solid. But Gyllenhaal has taken a very cliche character and be like, all right, I see this as very, been done. I'm going to go fucking nuts with it though. Like, I am just going to amp it up to like a 12 and just go with it. And that's what makes it so enigmatic and exciting, that it is everything you've seen before and done before, and even done to this level before, where you've seen the wacky guy and everything. But it's Jake Gyllenhaal doing it, for one. You'd love to see that guy taking chances now and doing this weird shit. Well, he's always take chances, but you like to see him get more notoriety and attention for doing it.
Or even
now.
The fact that he's like physically leaning out of the ambulance several times, like shoot the helicopters, like that scene of the LA River. It's so fucking fun.
Like I said, he's great in this. He's super, super fun. I almost wish that it was just a movie about him trying to get away from the cops. Like, I gotta be honest.
I think that would be a lot more tiring.
Hence the word almost, baby.
Right, but I mean, that's the thing to me, is just that I agree with you that, like, he's at this 10, 12 and that's fun, but I think if we had even, like, either those guys, the two of them not there, or even worse, I would think all of them at the 12, that would be of the more typical Michael Bay thing that would be frustrating to me.
Yeah, probably.
I think they ground a lot of those situations in a much more engaging way, where I'm still invested in the characters as much as I'm still having fun with Gyllenhaal being so over the top and silly. I think they're a necessity, and they do a great job with that necessity.
I mean, that's probably true. It grounds him a little bit more. I mean, that, and it grounds the whole package a little bit more. I mean, that is true. It would get tiresome if it's just a bunch of fucking people at Jake Gyllenhaal's level. I mean, you couldn't watch it for as long as it is.
That's what I would agree, like a Transformers movie is, where that's what like Shia LaBeouf and fucking the other
that's Transformers 2 and on. And the drone technology, it's cool the first 15 times. But it's so much of it. It's so much of it. It just reminds me, like, look, I got a new toy. I'm going to use the fuck out of it. And to me, it becomes stale after a while again. Like, that's the whole thing about this movie to me. It's exciting at first, but then I've seen it now. I've seen it 100 times. Like, okay, cool. All right. It's not the worst movie I've ever watched by any means. It's not the worst movie I've seen this year. But I mean, if I prefer, it's pretty bad that I prefer our bad choice, which I shit on, to our good choice on this episode.
That's interesting, because even the presence of a Jake Gyllenhaal makes it seem like you would like this one more, as opposed to just being like, because with the other movie, you're just like, it's a thing.
Well, but that's the thing. Jake Gyllenhaal is the only good thing for me in this movie. Is the only thing that I'm really like sold on. The rest of it is very much, ugh. Like, it's not even it's ugh.
Well, to go back to the drone thing, I think what works for me, even though like he does use it a lot, at the same time, I still think he uses it in very creative, clever ways every time. Like, initially when he starts using it, it's sort of like, here we're at the top of this building and we're going all the way fucking down it to get to like the street level with everybody, and then we cut to like a regular shot. But even like there's the point where he uses it like right when the cop gets shot and it's crowded around them as like the other cops, and eventually Jake Gyllenhaal and him are like responding to that. And then as it keeps going, we're like literally there's a sequence where like they're in the middle of like a big traffic thing, and like as they're going into oncoming traffic and the drone is like following right behind, we're seeing cars like crash right into each other in front of our fucking faces. It's almost the thing where like I would have wanted to see this in almost 3D, because it's just is like really putting you in the middle of the action set pieces.
I bet this movie would be fucking sick 3D. Like, honestly, this would be a badass 3D action movie. Then I would be like, this is the greatest shit ever. I guarantee you. Yeah, I bet.
And I think that's the thing, is like even the structure of like then these even like chase sequences or action set pieces, like the way that Bay like cuts in between like, you know, Garrett Dillahunt and everybody else examining it. I think it just really shows like the sad state of modern action, that his like very crazy gonzo style that used to annoy us has become so much more like a breath of fresh air, considering if you watch like any, say, MCU action set piece that's super like prevised and much more calculated and cold and doesn't get you that immersed in what's going on, versus this zany shit. I think people just embraced it a bit more, and I don't think that makes this movie great necessarily, but I do agree that it makes it one of the more fun and inspired action movies I've seen in like a couple years, quite frankly.
You know, I guess I gotta agree with you. For some reason, I never even think of the MCU as action movies, even though they are very much action movies. I was thinking of them as comic book movies because I grew up a comic book fan. So I have more fun watching the MCU movies for the characters and, you know, sort of, oh my God, that's exactly how they are in the comics, or certain lines and stuff. Like, it's definitely fanboyish for me. But yeah, I guess in that aspect, other than the MCU, I guess you would have to say the John Wick movies.
Like John Wick or like Mission Impossible. But it's a sad thing where like we have to go back to like these very different franchises that keep it up. Like, when was the last like non-big franchisey action movie you saw that you really enjoyed that came out in like the last, 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's a good question. I will not say Extraction, even though I do like parts of that movie, but I think that's way overblown. I'll tell you, man, that's a really good question. I'm sure if I had time, I could think of one, but that just goes to show how prevalent it is that I can't think of one right off the top of my head where I'm like, oh yeah, but this was really solid. I don't know, to be honest.
Like, honestly, I'm going to bring up one later in the episode that would, like, kind of equate to that, in terms of it not being part of a franchise or any of that shit. But even, like, before that, there's been, like, some bursts where, like, not even, like, pure action movies. Like, say, A Wrath of Man is an example of one where, like, they have action set pieces in there, but it's not even primarily, like, a big action movie. And the sad thing is, like, that's still better than what is considered primarily action movies, to some degree, that we get as of recent. Because I think that's what people are responding to with Bay coming back, and why there's that sort of thing of like, look, don't know what you got till it's gone. Because when now we get this, and it's just like, oh, it's like a bit more downgraded. Like, this isn't a huge, massive budget Michael Bay movie. It's a bit more of like a grounded one, despite how silly and over the top this is. That like this is like considered a much better action movie than like a lot of the other ones we've gotten recently. I think that says more about necessarily the state of modern action, this movie being great, but I still think it's fun despite that.
Yeah, all right.
To get on your train more of like some of the criticisms, I think I mentioned the stuff with the climax I didn't like. Even the stuff with a lot of the setup, there's a lot of like eye-rolly bits. Like, we didn't mention this, but Michael Bay references not one but two of his own movies in this movie, back to back, with the two cops. It's just like, oh, you ever seen The Rock? Winners go home and fuck the prom queen, right? And then later on, it's like, let's go in there like bad boys. In a scene that was like clear, that one felt very 80 yard, referencing Bad Boys.
Yeah, I agree. That was awful.
Yeah, and I think that's where I get more of like sort of the trouble with like the setup that you're talking about. Like the sort of the cliches feel a lot more staged. Just like, yeah, whenever we're dealing with this. And it's kind of like familiar and rote or whatever. And Michael Bay almost puts that in there like, okay, we have to have this setup, we have to have this pablum, and then I'm gonna go fucking nuts. And I think that nuts stuff is like endearing to watch in like a modern like action landscape. But still, once we get, like I said, to the climax stuff, that's where it feels like still very like familiar and rote. Like, we know where this is gonna end, let's just kind of speed this up. And even the ending, we're just like, oh, the cop gets up, he's like, that guy saved my life. And then Isaac Gonzalez is like going up in slow motion to the little girl, and she's like, hold my hand, keep holding my hand. Don't worry, I will. That's where it feels the most kind of like what you're talking about to me. It's just like, yeah, okay, we get it. Like, wrap it up, B. Cut down those bookends as much as you can. Just have the basic motivations, and then we're good.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe. I don't know.
It's been a bit of a rough week for you on this week, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a bad one.
Well, let's put you out of your misery, but Adam, go ahead and your final thoughts on Ambulance.
Like I said, Gyllenhaal, super fun. It's just more the same for me of Michael Bay that we've seen 1,000 times. There's nothing crazy special about it for me. It's a perfectly average action movie.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is, if this was released, say, in like, I don't know, 2002, I think I would more agree with you, just like, oh, this is like an average action movie or whatever. We were getting like multiple of these a year, as opposed to now where it's like, this is like a rare diamond in the rough of just like a non-franchise action movie that's coming out in theaters with actual stars in it and shit like that. That's not just dumped onto Netflix. I think, it's that weird thing where like, yeah, I guess it's quote unquote trendy to some extent to be like, oh man, we missed out on we miss auteurs like Michael Bay doing weird shit. But I think it's less that it's trendy and more just like, oh, we don't know what we got till it's gone kind of thing. Where I don't love all Michael Bay's movies. I'm not like a guy who's like revisionist, like, oh no, I love all the Michael Bay movies now. Transformers 4, we shit on that like 6 months ago. Now it's great. Not going to be that guy, especially with those fucking Transformers movies. If nothing else, the fact that this didn't do very well disappoints me in terms of like, I would like to have multiple of these a year again. Of just like these smaller scale action movies that have stars in them that are willing to do just like wild, weird things that might not always work for me, but at the very least are like more respectful, different choices, as opposed to just kind of like the plug and play we get a lot more of the time with action movies, especially the ones that are like kind of dumped to streaming. Yeah, I wish we would get more something like this, or one that I would say probably the last like American action movie that was pretty silly, even though it's also like a sci-fi horror kind of tinge or whatever. It's like an Upgrade. In terms of that was the last time I saw like a great fucking like action set piece in the middle that was like really inventive and unique and different. With Ambulance though, there's a few bits of that, particularly the drone photography, and I would say it's pretty fun overall, even with some of my issues with it. But yeah, judge for yourself, everybody. It's on Peacock right now as we're recording. Go ahead and give that a view.
Yeah, or don't.
Or don't. Either way, however you want to spend your time. But Adam, it's time that we get to a segment where we are going to talk about at least a movie that you like, because we're doing the Double Redo. Double Redo.
Double redo.
Double redo. Double redo.
Double redo. Double redo.
That works.
Yeah!
So the Double Redo is a segment we do every week where Adam and I, in terms of the topic that we're talking about, we recommend a good and steer you away from a bad movie each. So Adam has a good and a bad one. I have a good and a bad one that we'll talk about here. So I'm going first. And for my good, we were talking about like American action movies kind of being less than stellar sort of spectacles. I have a movie that is not an American movie. It's from India, but it's not a Bollywood movie. I believe it's Tollywood. Not every Indian movie is Bollywood, and that is not the case with RRR, which is this movie that kind of has had a bit of a film Twitter sort of moment over the last couple months, where it was put in theaters and everyone was talking about how great it was. I saw it in the theater. I was like, you know what? Sure, there's a huge sort of Indian audience in Tampa, particularly in my local theater. So it was like, oh, I've seen a couple of these, Indian movies, and they've been kind of fun, even though they're like big, long extravaganzas. I'm curious to see this one. And RRR is the most I've been entertained by like a big blockbuster spectacle in quite a bit. If you're unaware, probably of this movie as you are, basically, this takes place in like 1920, and is about these two different men. One is from like a local village that's being harassed by these white sort of imperialists that have come into India and have taken it over. Played, interestingly enough, by Ray Stevenson and Alison Doody of The Last Crusade, who are like these imperialist assholes that have come in, abduct a child. And one of our main heroes is like, you know what, I have to like take that kid out of slavery and bring her back to the village. And the other guy is part of like the big imperialist British army, who is an Indian guy. And he keeps trying to appeal to his imperialist leaders, who keep constantly like shooing him away. He ends up going undercover to try and basically destroy the resistance that's trying to come up against imperial British rule. And he meets up with this guy who's from the village, and they become fast friends. And they become like basically the best buddies possible. And there's a lot of like big over the top action set pieces. It's, of course, in Indian movies, there's a lot of big musical numbers as well. It's a 3-hour long, massive, big movie that has like so many big action set pieces that I found consistently fun. And I really like the friendship between the two of them. Those two guys, the two actors, I'm sorry I don't have their names up here, but they're really phenomenal. They're really fun. And I'm not as aware of necessarily all the politics, because these are based vaguely on real people, but at the same time, this movie is still like really endearing and like joyful, and has so much, like, I can't emphasize enough how there are like CG tigers. There's a big set piece that involves like oil from this fucking train that spills out and catches fire, and the bridge collapses, but these two guys are on like a rope saving this child from the collapsing bridge. It is so fascinating, and every set piece like tops the other. It is so enjoyable, goofy, and silly, and embraces all of that in a way that's very earnest and beautiful and weirdly like emotionally like heartbreaking at the same time. I really love this one. I think it transcends kind of like the potential like, oh, isn't this funny, tee-hee, we're watching a silly Indian movie like American audiences. I think it transcends that just to be like genuine great spectacle, regardless of where it's from or us judging it for such like, kind of like, oh, isn't it like a weird oddity? No, it's just a great fucking movie that I found personally. But the bad one I have kind of relates to our last episode, where I mentioned, we talked about Annihilation, about the Alex Garland movie. He followed that up with, and that is Men, which is an A24 film. It's a horror film, basically. If you're unaware, it follows this woman who's played by Jessie Buckley, who has recently lost her husband, and she's trying to go out to the quiet countryside and have a little vacation. But as she gets there, she notices all the men in the town are very forceful and constantly berate her, who are all played by the same character actor, Rory Kinnear. And I will say that him and Buckley are very good, particularly Rory Kinnear has to do like several different characters, and I think tries to make them all somewhat different, but the problem is like it's a modern A24 sort of horror film. We've talked about, and we love, a good A24 horror movie, but this one feels almost like it's an unintentional parody of those A24 horror movies, where all of those movies have some kind of degree of like, oh, there's a metaphor for what the horror represents and all this other stuff. And this movie, instead of having like, oh, there's a metaphor there, but there's also engaging character stuff or really engrossing like various different ways you can interpret the horror. It's very simple what the horror is trying to represent. It's very familiar. Every scene just feels kind of repetitive of what like that actual main message of like misogyny and sort of patriarchal rule over women and all this other stuff, which is a message I'm totally for. I totally 100% like support that, especially in our modern times, especially considering recent events. Like, I'm totally on board with that message, but it's so rote and repetitive, and it's not nearly as smart as it thinks it is. It's the first real big miss for Alex Garland for me, and I just really it's the biggest disappointment of the year, if nothing else, for me, that one.
Well, I have not seen either of yours. Big surprise. But I mean, I'll probably end up checking out Men just because A24 horror, even though I'm sure it's not going to be good, but it's one that I'm sure I'll end up watching. And then RRR is one that, you and I have attempted to do a movie night here and there to watch. So I definitely still want to see it. So I'm actually optimistically looking forward to one and sort of on guard about the other.
By the way, RRR in the States, as the one we're recording this, is on Netflix for everybody. And Hindi, which is not its original language, but it still is a lot of fun, I would argue, despite that.
Okay. So for my good, I had just recently watched the new David Cronenberg film, Crimes of the Future. It is without a doubt the weirdest movie I've seen in a long time, and not just because it's a Cronenberg body horror movie. All of the choices made in this movie are just kind of dumbfounding, but they all work. What is Kristen Stewart doing in this movie with her acting? It's fucking crazy. I've never seen it. Why is Viggo Mortensen dressed like that? Why is Scott Speedman so good in this? Why like what is this movie? It's the craziest fucking weirdest shit I've seen in a long time. Like when you think about old Cronenberg body horror, this fits right along up there with all of them. It's such a bizarre, weird little movie. And I do mean little because there's what, maybe 3 locations the whole movie? 4 at best? Even the casting decisions, like the guy who plays the head detective and the way he's dressed. And it's just, what is this? But I love every minute of it. It's just this odd, weird little movie that feels like a passion project for Cronenberg. And, of course, Mortensen is like Cronenberg's guy. So he's like, I'll do it. Sure. And originally he wasn't going to play the main character, but then he like wanted to. So Cronenberg let him. And yet he had like a horrible accident riding his horse and fucked his legs up. So that's why he's crouched the whole movie. And yet that somehow works for the character more.
There's a lot of scenes of him just laying on a couch in the movie.
Yeah, and it works more for the characters for some reason. Like, it's just a weird, kind of beautiful, brilliant movie. And I love every fucking minute of it. And I'm definitely one that I will rewatch very soon, just because I need to rewatch it again to maybe try to understand half the shit that I just saw. And then for my bad, very quickly, it's a foreign film. It's a Finnish horror film called Hatching, or The Hatching.
It's just Hatching, I believe. There's no difference.
Who gives a fuck? It's terrible. It's one of those movies where it almost goes to the level that you think it's going to go to consistently and then never goes there. It just sort of is a whimper for me. I found it very boring. I will say the saving grace is the performance of the young girl. She basically plays dual roles. She's actually really good in it. But other than that, I just found it kind of to be a bore fest. Applaud them for using practical effects in the sort of creature, but it's just a really silly looking design to me. It almost looks like it's something from the Dark Crystal instead of something horrific. It doesn't work for me basically on any level. I really expected more out of it for some reason, but I just kind of left feeling bleh.
I have seen both of yours. I will say Crimes of the Future, yeah. That was one I had in contention for being one of my good choices for my double review. I really enjoy that movie quite a bit. I think it's interesting where it kind of combines the body horror elements from Cronenberg's original career, but also feels very distinctly like it's part of this late era period of Cronenberg where it's so much more like kind of cynical and bitter. It's very casual with how like disturbing it is. Where it's one of those, like, what do you love about Cronenberg, where it's just like, oh my god, some of this horrific stuff is happening, but the characters are all pretty chill about it. Just like the casualness with like the way that they sort of do their performance art, I'll just say, not to spoil anything, but the way that they use that, particularly toward the end of the movie, with that, but also just the fact of like what a lot of the stuff with like the Scott Speedman character represents in terms of like sort of an almost weird evolution of man has to be in the middle of like a world that's like decaying and falling apart. I really dig that movie quite a bit. It's my favorite Cronenberg in quite a while, since Eastern Promises.
Oh, fuck yeah. Oh, God, I forgot about that one. Oh, that's a great one.
But yeah, I would say this is like one of my favorites. It's been a while for sure. And then I did watch Hatching just kind of on the strength, like you had talked to me about it. You know what? I'll give this a chance and see how I feel. I don't necessarily like it. I agree with you that I think it's disappointment. But I will say, I think the first half of it is not necessarily even as much like a horror movie to me, as much as like because the basic premise of it being like this young girl finds an egg that she kind of incubates and it hatches and this weird creature pops out of it. And I like a lot of the stuff with her actually interacting with that creature. I agree that I think the practical effects are phenomenal with that character, with that creature. And I don't mind the design necessarily. I thought that made it a bit more endearing, where like it's ugly and horrific, but also kind of cute in a way that made me endeared to like the fact that it's doing all these horrible things. But at the same time, this girl sees some kind of like interest in, especially that contrast with like her beauty obsessed mother and stuff like that. I thought the first half did a really good job of expressing all of that. And then as the sort of, you mentioned the twin element comes about, That's where I really lost interest. Just like, oh, this is what this is? I really lost interest and don't give a shit about this anymore. So I think I liked it a bit more than you did, but I would still agree that it's a bit of a disappointment, considering what I think it presents in the first half is a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah, and real quick, the mom, they paint her out to be this really despicable, horrible person. She's really not. I mean, she is, but doesn't she come across more like a dance mom than an absolute villain?
Yeah, I think the first half of that is trying to display that more. It's like she's sort of like an image-obsessed sort of like beauty mom. And then as it goes along with particularly like the interactions she has with another character, we'll just say, I think they try and paint her a lot more evilly in a way that I agree is, I don't think it's very fair for that character necessarily. But let's go ahead and repeat our titles for everybody out there. I'll go first here. My good is RRR. That's 3 R's right there. And my bad one is Men.
And my good choice is Crimes of the Future. And my bad choice is Hatching.
And please submit your own double redo choices out there through the various different methods that we'll be talking about here as we do our exit and lead up to us picking for next week's episode, so stay tuned for that. But we want to thank some people first, like Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music for our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for our artwork. Follow him at Night of Water, that's night with a K_of_water, for more of his great stuff. And also thank you to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get to vote in polls for individual movies and episode topics that we do. And also get to listen to bonus podcasts that we release, like later this month, we'll be doing a top 10 list podcast episode where we talk about our top 10 favorite alien creatures. That'll be very interesting to talk about, Adam.
Will it? Will it, though?
Yes, it will be. If you contribute that $1, it'll be super interesting and worth that $1.
Oh, yeah, you guys will be super fucking stoked. It's going to be super exciting.
That's the pitch, man, I know. That's it right there. And you also pick movies for us like Ambulance, so I appreciated that. I don't know if Adam
Yeah, well, hey, look, it was my choice. So I guess I can't. But fuck you guys, man.
I think the only person you can blame is yourself, Adam.
That's true, and I do that quite often, so it's, I guess, old hat.
It's so old and tired. Adam blames himself again. It's so rote. Did Michael Bay direct this ending section of the show?
You know who else has an old hat?
Oh, no! Oh, God, Michael Bay, kill him with a drone, please!
Everywhere he is, he sees dark now, because he's dead.
Oh, no. Oh, well, please, for more of us and our own antics, please follow us on Twitter and Facebook at DEDBpod, and also submit feedback and even double redo choices to us, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And for more of me, find me on Twitter and letterboxes at NotTheWho'sTommy, and also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com.
And you find me on Instagram and the old Twitter. No, you can't. No, I lied. You can't find me on Twitter anymore. Fuck Twitter. But you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram at Atom or Adam. That's ATOM_OR_ADAM. And on Facebook under my name, Adam Thomas. Send me your friend requests or a message and just tell me you listen to the show. I'll prove it. We can shoot the shit about whatever you want. Well, we can shoot the shit about a lot of things, maybe not whatever you want. You
asterisk
weirdos.
On.
Yeah, asterisk. Like, yeah, nah. And you can also find me on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON. Once again, that's Schwanson.
And if you somehow want to listen to more of this and Mr. Megorium, I guess, popping up occasionally, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, why not listen to all the other great shows on there? And you can dig into our Podbean main feed archives where we have several episodes we did before we joined a Talk Film Society. And if you can't help us with the Patreon, that's understandable. Money can be tight. But the completely free way to help us out is to rate, review, or simply share the show around because it gets us more visibility.
Yeah, and for everybody who's been doing that, thanks, guys.
But now, Adam, it's time we start picking for next week's episode. And, we do this at the end of every episode where Adam and I, we switch up on the quality, but one of us has 2 good movies, one of us has 2 bad movies. And we, have a number assigned between 1 and 10 for each of our choices. And the other person will pick a number between 1 and 10 and say like, oh, I picked number 4. And the other person will be like, oh, that's closest to blank, which will be, the good choice. Then vice versa, it gets us the bad choice. But keep in mind there's the Godfather rule that's been implemented where Adam and I each have a single veto in our back pocket we have to use by next May for our next anniversary. And it's one single veto that if we hear someone, we pick that number, we hear the choice, we're like, you know what? I want to cover that movie. So I'm going to say, actually, I'll take the cannoli. And thus that choice is gone. We have to go with whatever other choice is there, but we can only do that once. It's just burn a hole and it's use it or lose it. So we might use it here for this particular episode, which was shouted again to our Patreon. This was voted on by our Patreon supporters. It's a sort of redemption thing, because we do this all, once a month. We ask our patrons to choose, on a poll between two topics. We cover for an episode of the month. And this time we had two ones that hadn't won before up on the docket to be chosen. And you all ended up choosing one that we almost picked, which is 70s period pieces, which I didn't expect to win. Between that and crime thrillers was the other choice. But I'm glad. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, me too. I also did not expect that, but yeah, we'll take it.
Yes, and you have the two bad choices. I've got the two good ones. So go ahead first, Adam, for my two good choices. Pick a number between 1 and 10.
Okay. Number 4.
Okay. At number 3, I have a movie that was not very successful when it came out, only, about 6 or so years ago, but is I think a very great, very fun, a sort of crime detective thriller. Plenty of laughs in it too. I have Shane Black's The Nice Guys.
Yes. I love this movie. I think it is so fucking funny. Perfect.
All right, so I guess you're not taking the cannoli on that one then, based on...
No fucking way. No way.
Well, on the other side of things, over at number 7, I had one that I also think is pretty great, but it's more of the comedy drama vibe. I have Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous.
I've never seen that movie.
What?
Yep, that's one of the movies that, never seen it.
I think it's a masterpiece if you watch the theatrical cut. The bootleg cut is good, but the original theatrical cut is kind of a perfect fucking movie, in my opinion. But Adam, your two bad picks. I'm gonna go with the decade itself. I'll go with number 7.
At number 8, I have. I'm just gonna tell you, I have 54.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is one that came up when I was doing my research of 70s period pieces. I haven't seen it before. You know what? I'll go ahead and go with it. I'll go with 54.
All right. Fair enough. It's not good. At number 1.
I'm so surprised given you had the bad picks. I thought it was going to be a banger like Deep Water.
At number 1, I have a huge misfire, which with the cast sucks, and with who directed it sucks, and the source material sucks. It's Summer of Sam.
Oh, yes, the Spike Lee joint.
Yep.
One I also have not seen.
It's got good parts, but mostly it's just a mess.
Okay, so 54 and The Nice Guys. All right.
Okay.
We'll be having that fun next time, everybody. But until then, you just gotta keep on soldiering through this year and hope you don't get into an ambulance with Jake Gyllenhaal.
Or do. He's the only good part about the ambulance.
I mean, hopefully you at least don't get there by eating some poison snails.
Yeah. Or do, and you can get buried. And you'll get buried along with me.